On October the 31st, 1517, Martin Luther posted 95 big questions which he believed faced the church of his day to the local church door in Wittenberg, Germany. 500 years later, I decided to post 95 new questions, one a week, to the web. Questions which I believe that the church must face in the 21st century. Welcome back to Chalke Talk after the summer break. Over the coming weeks, I'm planning to continue to introduce some of the themes that I explore in more depth in my new book, The Lost Message of Paul, because like I've said before, I'm convinced that the Apostle Paul has had a really rough deal. I believe that Paul was the great includer, and that though he's often been blamed for so many of the church's worst behaviours, past and present, everything from misogyny to homophobia, not only has he been misunderstood, but more than that, I think he'd be absolutely horrified by the catalogue of excluding policies and shame-inducing dogmas that have been generated and propagated in his name. So let's start with the idea of hell and all those threats of fire, brimstone and eternal punishment that awaits unbelievers beyond the grave. Here's the amazing thing. Although Paul is often thought of as the preacher of hell and damnation, as a matter of fact, he never once mentions the word for or the concept of hell ever. Now, for many, this comes as a massive surprise, but here are a couple more. First, there's no record of any extended depiction of the horror of hell until more than a century after Paul's life. But second, and perhaps most surprisingly of all, is the fact that it was not until the bishops of the western half of the church, the Catholic Church, gathered in 1215, a couple of centuries into the second millennium, for the Fourth Lateran Council in Rome, that they committed formally to the idea of what they chose to term perpetual punishment with the devil for those who were unworthy of Christ. So if they didn't come from Paul, where do all those vivid and terrifying images of eternal damnation and suffering originate? It's a matter of historical record that following the Fourth Lateran Council, a host of European poets and artists of the Middle Ages took the idea up in their work. It provided them with the perfect opportunity to use their imaginations and creativity to full effect. From Dante and his depiction of hell in his poem Inferno, all the way to Michelangelo, who 2 centuries later used his giant fresco, The Last Judgment, which to this day covers the whole altar wall of the Sistine Chapel in Rome to depict the most shocking and graphic scene of the dead being dragged down into the agony of hell. This was 16th century social media used to its greatest impact. And you don't have to be that much of a cynic to view all this as a bit of a case of very good timing. Just as the church's coffers were beginning to run dry and the Pope found himself searching for new ways to generate much needed revenue, along comes a doctrine that scares the living daylights out of people by dangling them over an everlasting pit of living death, but also gives the church the opportunity to offer everyone a way out through penance and payment to them. It was perfect. The creation of fear through the threat of exclusion is, after all, a time-tested way of maintaining control. Why does all this history matter, though? Because none of it's about dry and dusty theology. Instead, it's about real lives and relationships. It's about the hopes, fears and anxieties of our families and our friends. It's about the people that we love and their futures. It's about us. And it's about the search for truth. Much more about all of this next week. But for now, a question. If what I've said is true, what difference would it make to you and to the message of the church? I explore this issue more deeply, as well as many others raised by the Apostle Paul's writing in my new book, The Lost Message of Paul. You can purchase your paperback copy today from openchurch.network/Lost Message of Paul, or from any good bookshop. An ebook and an audiobook are also available from Amazon, as well as from other online retailers.